Hi, I'm Dan Couteau, and I'd like to thank you for purchasing my rig, SpritZ. So I'm sure you know how to install it. Basically, you take the lib file from the zip and just drop it into your C4D browser folder, and it'll load as a preset folder here. So here I am in Cinema, and what I'm going to do is open up one of these presets here. Let's try Summer. So all you have to do is double click it, and it will load. When it comes in, the first thing you want to do is go to your attributes manager and just click that little plus sign. So you've got the entire SpritZ window open and you can move it around. First thing I usually do is turn it off, because it is system heavy and you can move things around a lot quicker and easier when you have it off. This preset comes preloaded with a can. And what I'm going to do is just open up SpritZ here, and there's a little camera in there, and I'll just go to that view. So how SpritZ works is there are sort of two sets of drops. The first set under Coalesce are big drops, small drops, and micro drops. This is a series that will give you a nice blend and a mosaic of chaos, watery chaos, that will hopefully look really good on whatever you put it on. And the other set here, mist, these are little spheres that form mist, and they are not part of, and they don't interact with any of these other things. The cool thing about the Coalesce feature is that all these guys interact with one another and they make really interesting shapes. So let's get started. One of the important things here is to really only put the drops where you need to put them. So if I've got my object selected, I go into polygon mode and I basically just select where I want the drops to appear. So that way I'm not putting drops on the backs of cans, the top of the can, the bottom of the can, in places that if I were to do this as a photograph, I wouldn't SpritZ. So I've already made a selection here, and you basically take that and drop that into Object, and you can also drop it into Selection. If you want, you can just drop your whole object in here. That's not a problem. Or for my purposes, I'm going to use the Selection. So let's get started. The first thing I want to do is turn off everything except the smallest droplets, the micro drops. Then I'm going to turn SpritZ on, and let's just see what we get. So I've turned the micro drops on, but where are they? The micro drops only work when the Coalesce feature is on, so that must be on for the micro drops to work. And there they are. So you can see them speckled about, and yeah, they look pretty good to my eye. So the other thing that I turn off when I'm just working with the composition of the droplets is subdivision. So once you can turn that on, that's what you want to turn on for rendering. And there they are, there is how they'd render. But for now, we're just playing around, we're going to turn that off. So the next one I want to turn on is the small droplets and see what they do. So the small droplets are looking rather large. So what do we want to do with that? Well, we can fix that size right here. Let's take that down to 0.8 and see what that does. Maybe take these down to 800 as well. And that's looking a lot better. Keep in mind this is processor intensive, so it's a weighty rig. So if it's taking a little bit of time, then let it take some time, or just do a quick render. That usually gets things happening. And the next thing I want to turn on is the big drops. So before I turn those on, I want to make sure they're a little bit larger than the small drops. So let's make those 1.3. And we'll go for, I think, 450. And let's see what that looks like. And there they are, and that's looking pretty good. So you can see the nice thing about this Coalesce feature is that the droplets are merging together when they come up. And what you want to do is just play around with the random settings until you get a nice pattern. What I usually do is several different patterns and save the iterations and render them out in high res. And that way I've got lots of comping material in Photoshop. in case I want to move or get rid of an area of droplets, replace them with another area. Now the last thing we're going to turn on and take a look at, actually let's do a render of this first so you can see what this is going to look like. And there it is. This is a Grayscale Gorilla lighting rig, and I think it looks pretty good. 47 seconds, and that's 1200 by 600. The other thing, of course, you might want to turn on is the sub-D on your object. So the next thing I want to do is turn on the mist function. Now, as I explained earlier, mist basically is not part of the coalesce feature, and that way we can get really, really tiny droplets and scatter them all about. So let's turn that on and see what it looks like. And there you can see them sprinkled throughout. I really like this effect a lot too. And the mist guys, you can basically change the droplet size, the random, and the scale as well, the random scale. So let's take a render of that and see what that looks like. And here it is with the mist. Here's the previous render, and there's the mist render, and here they are side by side. So you can see it does add that subtle little touch. If you're going to go in for really tight detail work, you're going to have to clean up areas where they obviously don't, the drops obviously don't coalesce. Now the next thing I want to show you is the drip function. So basically we have drips and tears. So here we have some of the close-ups, and these are the drips. The difference between the two of them is that the drips are based on paths. So there's some curves and some odd chaotic shapes that you can get with the drips, and the tears are basically designed to look more like tears. That's why they're called that. So we'll close this for a sec. And if you go to one of these guys here, you can obviously turn them all off. So let's turn a few off so we can focus on one. And it twirls down here. And you can basically use this panel here to move the drip around. And you can use this for finer movement across the surface of the bottle. Okay, you can turn on subdivisions if you want to see what this guy looks like a little bit better. Okay, and you can move them up and down. And here we can change the amount of drip, the size of the drip, the little bulge on the end. You can make that bigger or smaller. And you can scale the waviness of the drip and the length of the drip. So there's quite a lot of features there that will get you moving. And then if we go back to here, sometimes what I like to do is set up some drops and just try to find, or what I'll do is paint on here an area that I just want the drops to appear. These guys here, the bigs, the smalls. And then I want to use the blank area, and that's where I'll park a drip. Let's take a look at the tears. So if we come back to our camera, close this guy, and if we turn this guy on, let's work with maybe number 2. Yep. Okay. So the tears are a little bit different. They're metaballs within themselves. Another major difference between the drips and the tears is the drips will interact with the coalescing drops, so for added realism. But sometimes you don't want that, and you want to just park a little drip, you want to park a tear. That's the tool you want to use so it doesn't interact with anything else that's around it. So you've got a beautiful shape. It's not going to suddenly zoom off and become a metaball. So let's go into some of the controls here. Again, this is for gross movement and the fine movement. Sorry, I'm in tier 1 and we've got tier 2 checked off. So you want to make sure. By the way, sometimes I found that just turning on and off user data and switching to object, if you see any problems with these guys' menus acting in a funny way, that will clean that up. Okay, so here we go. We're just moving the drip around and we move them up and down. The top size of the drip, and we can move the top part, and we can move the top part over if we want a little bit, and the bottom part. can move that down as well. So we're getting a nice long, sort of like a paint run almost. And here are some controls that will basically allow you to make the drip tighter, more compact, more blobby, more chaotic, larger, smaller, changes viscosity. So there's a lot of stuff you can play around with here. Then as well, there's a taper function. I've got this off for now, so you can see that the top of the tier just expanded, and if I turn that on, it gets much more of a tier shape. You can also really play around with that value, and there's a curvature value in there as well. I've got fillet on, so we can just play around with that. And you can see there are lots of options here. The last thing I'm going to show you is this transparency button. And this is for when you have transparent objects like beer bottles. So if we turn that on, it will switch on a boule function that will cut through the SpritZ droplets. And there you see it. So if I turn on full wireframe, you can see that the boule is cutting through here. These are obviously the ones we see at the back, but it does a pretty good job. So here's a render with transparency, and we can see along here that the reflections and the little guys here are acting correctly. Down here is without the transparency, and you can see things are penetrating. And this may be a smoother, slightly smoother look, but keep in mind, were I to do this with an actual bottle, it would be double-sided, and we would definitely see a lot more interpenetration of the SpritZ droplets. But this is just a one-sided bottle for a sample. So that's it. I'd like to thank you for purchasing SpritZ, and hope to see you again with another product. Thanks again.